All right, for more on this, I want to bring in Kimberly Dozier, CNN Global Affairs analyst. Now, we were just listening to Alex there lay out some of the key threads that we're seeing. Among them, President Biden meeting with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. What do you expect to come out of this meeting? And can you just contextualize the significance of this meeting in a moment like this?
I think what will come out of the meeting publicly is a lot less important than what's going to happen behind closed doors in the Oval Office. In that Stoltenberg, he always makes pains to not embarrass his hosts, but he has given interviews, including one to The Economist, where he's talked about if Ukraine is to win this fight with Russia, then the aid given to it can't have strings attached. This is a pointed message to Joe Biden that you got to stop telling Ukraine that it can't use the weapon systems you're giving it unless it avoids striking Russia. Now, of course, Biden has slightly loosened the reins such that Ukraine can hit Russian troops around the border city of Kharkiv, the Ukrainian city that Russia's trying to take again. But Stoltenberg has said publicly, and I've spoken to a number of European officials in the past several weeks who privately said that they think the Biden White House is still too afraid of Vladimir Putin's threat to use nuclear weapons. And that's why they're tying Ukraine's hands on long-range missile systems, which could be a deciding factor in this fight.
Yeah. Look, another thing we've been keeping an eye on is there was an agreement last week by defense ministers that would put NATO in charge of the coordination of security assistance and training for Ukraine, which is significant because I think it's fair to say it's been increasingly difficult in the United States, at least from Capitol Hill's perspective, to get legislation passed to continue supporting Ukraine. And then, of course, the very real possibility that former President Trump could be elected again, where he has not been shy about wanting to do things differently in regards to the relationship there. So is that move on the part of NATO, is that really just anticipating an uncertain election outcome in November here in the United States, or are there other motivations from a Eurocentric standpoint where they would benefit?
The good thing about having NATO coordinate some of this assistance and aid is that there have been complaints from inside Ukraine that countries promise to give aid, and then it's not clear when or how it's going to show up. If you've got NATO coordinating all those deliveries with the big spreadsheet saying, hey, you guys haven't sent your promised artillery yet, that's helpful. But the U.S. is the main contributor to financially and leader of NATO. So if Donald Trump decides to change aid to Ukraine, withdraw aid from Ukraine, and try to force Kyiv to the negotiating table with Moscow, as many inside Ukraine fear he might do, there is little that the Biden administration can put in place to stop that. Even the 10-year security agreement that Biden signed with President Zelensky last week, it's helpful, it looks great on paper, but it's not a treaty ratified by Congress. Therefore, the next president can roll it back.
Yeah, and we have seen President Trump, at least when he was elected last time, former President Trump, there was a history of him undoing a lot of the foreign policy decisions, including the JCPOA, Paris Climate Accords, and more. Obviously, we talked about the implications of Stoltenberg announcing more than 20 of the 32 NATO allies will spend at least 2% of GDP on defense this year. And militarily, of course, that has its own implications and benefits. But it also comes just weeks before the NATO summit held in Washington, and amid criticism by Donald Trump about how NATO countries are spending defense budgets in regards to their GDP. Politically speaking, does that make it harder for the former president and his allies to threaten to abandon NATO if they are actually increasing the amount that they're spending on defense?
Look, it's helpful, but if you're a glass half empty kind of person, you're still going to look at the 12 countries that aren't, quote unquote, measuring up, to use one of Donald Trump's phrases, and say, you know, unless those countries also contribute 2% of their GDP to their own defense, then the U.S. might not come to their aid if Russia or somebody else does something to them. That's a threat that Trump has made before. He's repeated on the campaign trail. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these countries are investing so much in their defense, not because of Trump's threats, but because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And it's made them realize that they might not have Washington, that they might actually need to face off with Moscow. And then Trump's agitation has made them realize they might not have the U.S. to depend on in future.
Yeah. Look, a lot of intricacies here. Kimberly, Dozier, really appreciate the conversation and perspective. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.